I know you want a pass rusher, but a first round offensive lineman still makes sense for the Green Bay Packers, even after they just took one.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. I know what you're going to say already. No, they can't possibly take another offensive lineman. But here's why. Not only can they, it would make sense for them to do it. Number one, if you're going to take a high-level offensive lineman, or that's what you want, it makes sense to do it early. That is when, historically, you're going to get the most value. Yes, the Packers have been able to do something no other team in the NFL can replicate with what they've been able to do with these round of 4 guys. It's not the kind of thing that you want to bank on long term. And by the way, Brian Gutekunst has not banked on it. I don't think he could have expected Rasheed Walker was going to come in and be the starting left tackle for this team. I don't think he expected when he drafted Zach Tom that he was going to come in and be a Pro Bowl borderline all-pro. Like if they did left tackle, right tackle, he would probably be like second team all-pro, at worst third team if they did that. I think he is probably the third best right tackle in the league. Lane Johnson, Penei Sewell, and Zach Tom. That's probably your 3 best right tackles. We talked yesterday about this idea of keeping Rasheed Walker. If they keep Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan ends up being your right guard of the future, well, you're doing that premised on the fact that, well, Elgton Jenkins is moving to center and then he is coming off the books. You still need a center. Now, I think we can debate the value there. Do you really want a guy who's a center in the first round? That's not a real center. That would have to be changing positions to be your center. Now, he would have this whole season to learn it. But I think that that's a reasonable question to bring up here. But let's say, and Matt LaFleur reiterated yesterday, Jordan Morgan is going to compete to be the starting left tackle for the Green Bay Packers. If that happens, you move on from Rasheed Walker. You keep Elgton Jenkins at center. You're probably not paying Sean Rhyan. Well, that's a starting guard. We just saw in free agency what starting guards cost. Like so often we think of first round players and you're looking at, okay, what are you getting for money? What is the discount that you're getting? What is the excess value that you're getting at that contract? It's why taking linebackers and running backs and defensive tackles, non-pass rushers in the first round is not great process, because even if they hit, you're not getting a huge ROI. Even if you're getting the elite players. So you hit on a first round corner, you're talking about a guy who is going to make $25 million on the open market. You hit on an elite receiver, you're talking about a guy who's going to make $30 million on the open market. You hit on an elite pass rusher, $30 million. You hit on an elite quarterback, $50 million. You hit on an elite running back, it's $13 million. So how much money are you really saving? You're getting a good player, and you always would rather have good players than the alternatives. But I would rather have a B+ offensive tackle than an A running back. That's true a lot of positions. So is guard creeping up? Like, these defensive tackles now, they're getting hella paid. And one of the reasons why you're seeing the markets for guards creep up is because they're the ones that are having to block these guys. And if you're getting $18, $19, $20 million a year to be a guard, we may have to start rethinking the way that we look at positional value and excess value, excess contract value, all that stuff. Now, history tells us still that you can wait on guards. The league is historically bad at ordering them, that it makes sense, not only from a value standpoint, but from a historical hit rate standpoint, to wait if they're going to play guard. But let's imagine a scenario where you're expecting Jordan Morgan to be your left tackle of the future. Well, you have to do that in April before you get a chance to see him really compete with Rasheed Walker in year 2. And remember, he barely played last year, barely practiced last year. That is quite the leap of faith. So are there players in this draft who you could take in the first round and go, not only does this guy provide left tackle insurance if Jordan Morgan can't do it, but because the Packers have this methodology where they say, we want tackles who can play guard or center, then you might take one of these guys and say, look, either he can compete with Jordan Morgan at left tackle in 2026, or if Jordan Morgan wins that job this year, you've got this great swing tackle in Rasheed Walker, and then you've got a guy who can compete at guard or center. Like JC Treader made the transition from tackle to center. Now, again, the first round value may not be there, but you have to build in this idea that, hey, he could be a left tackle for us. And I think that's what Jordan Morgan was too. Hey, this guy could be a left tackle if we want him to be. But if we need him to play right guard or left guard or wherever, we can do that. That's the premise here. And so I started watching the offensive linemen in the last week. And I don't love this group. But there are two players who I really like, who fit the Packers, who are experienced, who are tackles who could play tackle but also could play guard. Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas. If you run his relative athletic score as a guard, he's like a 95th percentile guard athlete. He's huge, thick lower body, powerful, moves bodies in the run game. I think he could play left tackle in the league. I think he's kind of an ideal right tackle if you're going to play tackle in the NFL. But he would fit the mold of guys that you would want playing guard on this team. You want to get bigger with Aaron Banks, with Elton Jenkins, Sean Ryan. You want to move bodies. You want to run gap scheme. You want to run power, come downhill and just hit people. He can do that. You be your right guard. And now you have someone who swing tackle. Because if Jordan Morgan is your left tackle, you're moving on from Rasheed Walker. You need a swing tackle. I think someone like Kelvin Banks would be very much in that Lane Taylor mold, where if you needed him to kick out, Zach Tom misses a game, you can kick him out and play tackle there. You wouldn't need a true swing tackle. And if Jordan Morgan doesn't win that job in August, you have someone who could come in right away and be that swing tackle for you. Jordan Morgan competes with Sean Ryan for the guard position. And again, as we said yesterday, if Jordan Morgan can't win the left tackle job or the right guard job, then you need one of these guys anyway. Like you definitely need one. And so the problem is you're going into the draft flying blind. You don't know what that's going to look like. They love him. They think highly of him, but that doesn't mean he's going to perform. The other guy is Oregon's Josh Connerly. A little bit smaller, a little bit more of a traditional tackle size. I think a little bit more of a traditional left tackle, but moves well enough, shows enough power to me in the run game where for a zone team, and look, again, they do want to get bigger on the inside, but he's got the frame. Neither of these guys have long arms, but they have long wingspans because they're broad chested. And I think sometimes the arm conversation gets a little wonky because it doesn't matter solely about arm length. Wingspan matters too because it's about your range. How far laterally can you move? Now, the length of your arms matters when you're talking about a bull rush. Can someone get into your chest? Is my arm longer than you? Can I keep you at bay because I've got 34 and a half, 35-inch arms. That would be ideal. The Packers, by the way, have made do with guys that don't have super long arms. Brian Bulaga didn't. David Bakhtiari didn't. So Rashid Walker doesn't. So it's not a deal breaker for the Packers. These guys do have big wingspans. They can get to these blocks. They're the type of players where you go, okay, if that's the best, if the pass rushers have come off the board, you don't like the receiver options, the corner options, and someone like Calvin Banks Jr., who I think, by the way, is a top 10 talent in this draft. I think you're going to think I'm crazy, especially because there are multiple tackles that are talked about in the top 10, and I'm not going to say either one of their names. I think Calvin Banks Jr. is the best tackle in this class. I do. If he's there at 23, I would run the card in. I think it makes sense. Now, the defensive line, they're probably going to add some here, but they're going to need their coach to improve what's already on the roster and whoever they bring in. I want to talk a little bit more about DeMarcus Covington next on Locked On Packers. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets, sports, concerts, comedy, theater. And with the low price guarantee, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and that low price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Matt LaFleur was asked about DeMarcus Covington, the new defensive line coach, how he would describe DeMarcus Covington. And the first thing out of his mouth is, he's a technician. I want to remind you what The Leap reported a year ago around this time. When Jason Rebrovich was promoted from pass rush specialist to defensive line coach, I'm going to read directly from our reporting in The Leap. Multiple sources tell The Leap that some of the position coach changes were not met with glee from all the key stakeholders on defense. Being a little tongue-in-cheek here. It wasn't just who left either. In at least one case, the retained coach in question played a major role in a perceived lack of in-game adjustments and situational coaching. He was seen more as a motivator than a technical guru, which raises questions of who will handle those nuances on the new staff. I did not initially report that this was about Jason Rebrovich. I subsequently said that's who we were talking about here. And it's not a surprise to me that they went out and found a coach who would fill that void. And you can imagine in-game adjustments. These are things like, okay, they're doing certain things. How can we counter? How can we find opportunities? If he's going to jump set, if he's like those kinds of nuances, in-game adjustments. If they're going to go to more 7-man protections, how can you attack? Those sorts of adjustments are vital. And then there's the player development piece. If you are not a technician, if you are not a technical coach, if you're a rah-rah coach, you need to have guys who are already technically proficient, but this is a young defensive front. Rashawn Gary, 2019 draft class. Lucas Van Ness, 2023 draft class. Carl Brooks, 2023 draft class. Devontae Wyatt, 2022 draft class. Kobe Wooden, 2023 draft class. So Brenton Cox, this is a young group. Like, yes, Preston Smith was on the roster. Rashawn Gary at this point is a veteran. Kenny Clark is clearly a veteran. But you needed development. You needed these guys to get better with pass rush plans. You needed these guys to get better with hand placement, with in-game adjustments, with game plan, with scouting opposing offensive linemen. Okay, how can we attack? His left hand is weaker than his right hand. Oh, when they want to run outside zone, he does this. When they go to play action, when they go to 7-man protections. There's so many details and nuances here that if you don't have a coach who can help these young players prepared to succeed, then they are set up to fail. And it's not surprising that the Packers had to change the way that they wanted to play when you're not getting that sort of development from these guys. And it is beyond a credit to Jeff Hafley. I mean, it is a testament to the quality of the coach that he is, that they were able to, on the fly, change the way that they play defense, change the way that they pressure quarterbacks, change the way that they structure coverage, and find a way to, at the end of the season, be playing, frankly, as well as almost any defense in the NFL without Jair Alexander, without Kenny Clark playing at a Pro Bowl level, without Lucas Van Ness taking that next step. They need that development, though. And this goes back to the conversations we were having yesterday about the guys on the roster. Are they good enough? I do think the Packers look at this team and go, there's too much talent for them to be as ineffectual as they were last year. I mean, we saw Devontae Wyatt in spurts. Part of this is, hey, was everybody in the right positions? Would it have actually made more sense to have Kenny Clark play more nose tackle so you could play Devontae Wyatt next to him and get your best interior pass rusher on the field more often? Brian Gutekunst has said on multiple occasions that he thinks Devontae Wyatt was the best interior pass rusher on this team last year. He's right. He was. So why didn't he play more? Why did Carl Brooks outsnap him? Well, part of it was they were having Carl Brooks literally play nose tackle at times because they wanted Kenny Clark playing 3 technique. Well, it's the defensive line coach's job to make sure everyone is doing the job that is best suited to them. And yes, it's great. Rashawn Gary had his best year ever stopping the run. And yes, TJ Slayton was a force stopping the run. And it is a credit to this team, but they also played heavier boxes than they had played in recent years. I mean, they led the league in dime or pert near close with Joe Barry in 2021. They played more nickel in 2022, but the Packers played more base last year. They played more single high safety, so they're playing more 8-man boxes. Or they're playing single high safety from nickel, so it's really more of a 7-man box, but it's still an extra defender in the box that helps with your run fits. It's not just those guys up front winning one-on-one. But the Packers do need guys who can win one-on-one, and you have to be able to develop them. I thought Todd McShay said something really interesting, that this is a good draft at the top in the first round. He said there could be 7 pass rushers that go in the first round, which would be the most since, I believe, 2012. But that the second round guys are not great. Now, I happen to like some of the second round guys, or guys that I think belong in the second round. Guys like JTT. But then it becomes stronger in the third round. Well, if you're going to add a third round pass rusher to this group, you damn sure better have a coach who can help him with the technical side, because you heard CJ West talk about it. Once the games start, the development is tricky. Like once you get to practice, once you got to start preparing for games, it gets hard to skill develop because you're so opponent focused. Okay, we got to handle this week. Now it's about responsibilities. It's about game plan. You can't be working on chop rip and scouting. I mean, you're going to be scouting offensive line, so you hope that there's some reps there. But if that's not really what your coach is great at, it's the coaching version of attitude reflects leadership. Like you get the kind of coaching that you're getting. And if that's not the best way to learn, if that's not the best way to develop skills, then it's not a surprise when your guys don't develop skills, even if they are working in the offseason. Maybe it's the case then in favor of the Packers trying to find a pass rusher with a little bit more polish. Someone like Donovan Ezeraku, who checks their physical, at least their athleticism boxes. He's a little bit undersized, but has length, You could add to the frame, is a good enough run defender, but you don't need to develop the skill and the polish there. He is, for my money, the best hand fighter in this class of pass rushers. You take him at 23, he walks into that room and he might have the most diverse array of pass rush moves on the team day one. And that's not to say, take someone with the upside because you hired a technical coach with DeMarcus Covington. But the players who worked with DeMarcus Covington, based on the intel that I got, is they really liked him. They didn't like defensive coordinator DeMarcus Covington because he just wasn't quite ready for that job. But as a position coach, there was a fear. We talked about this when it happened, that you hire a young coach, the cynical folks out there are going to go, they cheaped out. They went the cheap route, and maybe they did. And maybe he was less money than other coaches would have wanted. But I think they found, even if it was a cheap option, and again, we don't know, but they found a coach who they think is going to do some of the things that they weren't getting before. From a technical standpoint, hey, if we're going to be a draft and develop team, we can't forget the develop part of this. You have to be able to develop skills, add to the athletic profile, because the athletic profile only gets you so far. A lot of these guys are used to just winning with athleticism. Like if you're going to draft Shamar Stewart, if you're going to draft Landon Jackson, if you're going to draft Michael Williams, you're going to need to develop those guys. If you're going to draft Derek Harmon, Walter Nolan, you're going to need to develop their pass rush skills. Just saying, come on, let's go, that's not enough. And so hopefully the Packers have found someone who can do that. Luckily, we know they have a defensive coordinator who, even if we don't see the fruit of that labor in year one, has the dexterity, the flexibility, the intelligence, the creativity to get this team where it needs to go, regardless of some of the deficiencies that it may have. All right, I want to close today's show talking about these rule changes. That's next on Locked On Packers. The tush push ban did not pass. Split, basically dead even. Not basically. Literally, 16 teams. So tabled for now. I don't really care that much. I want them to call the play legally. That would be what I would like. Please call the play legally. We talked about this yesterday with Louis DiBiase from Locked On Eagles. But what they did change is the overtime rules. And this is important because it will actually change strategy. They kept the 10-minute clock in overtime, which is interesting because in college, you go to the you score, I score, but the clock is irrelevant because if you score, then I get to score. And then we start over where you get to score and I get to score. But that's not happening in the NFL. And I'll be honest, I like it. I like that it's not a gimmick, really. It is okay, if you come down and you score a touchdown, you kick off, you get your possession, and now we go. Versus, and I've pitched before, like both teams get a possession at the 50. But that ultimately gets a little gimmicky, right? Like you still, in this version, you're still going to kick off, and they changed the kickoff rule. And so then you get your possession, you score, and now the other team gets it. But it's a 10-minute period, not 15. It used to be 15, and a quarter is 15, of course. Well, what if the first team holds it for 8 minutes and you got to score a touchdown? Well, at least you get the chance. And I've heard some people like, oh, people just sit on the ball and take the air out. I'm like, do you understand how hard it is to hold the ball for 10 minutes? If you go down and you kick a field goal, and especially if you get down and you end up having to kick a field goal because you get conservative trying to take the air out of the ball, that's just not the way to do it. It just doesn't make sense to do that because you're risking getting a field goal and then the other team is getting the ball back, which is the old rules they would have too. But now you're risking them getting the ball back and tying it or taking the lead and winning. The sudden death was stupid. And I don't understand the argument from anyone that says that the old rule was good. I understand what the data says, that it didn't actually affect wins and losses that much, but there is this matter of equity. And if you need to score to win, which you do, then both teams need to have the chance to score, period. Now, that will be the case. Both teams will get the chance to score. But what I love about this is if one team goes down and gets a touchdown, and the other team goes down and gets a touchdown, you don't reset at the 25, 30, whatever, or the 50 in my proposal. You just keep playing. You just keep playing until someone wins. I think this is going to lead, weirdly, to more ties. Because I think you're going to see teams go down and score, and then you have to go try and score. So you're going to have to go for it on fourth down. Whereas in other circumstances, if you don't go down and score, once you allow the touchdown, the game is over, of course. But then you're setting up the second team to know exactly what they need. Maybe you go for two. I think we will see teams going for two. We're going to see teams lose in that situation. We're going to see teams win in that situation. We're going to see ties because teams are going to take the coward's way out. But it also changes the way that you have to approach overtime. This becomes like in college where you want the ball second because you want to know if you have to match. You want to know what you have to match. And okay, you get a stop. It's not like in college where you're almost certainly not going to get a stop unless you get a turnover because you're already in scoring range. Now I know, collegiate kickers kind of stink, but this is important to have the strategy piece on this. And I already heard from some people like, actually, you want to take the ball first because you don't know how much time you're going to get. I'm like, if you give up a 10-minute drive and it's a touchdown, you deserve to lose. Like, that's just what it is. Sorry. Like, that's embarrassing for you. So I love this rule change. I don't know what took so long, frankly. It's not the only rule change. So they wanted to change the kickoff. We talked about this the other day. And the problem was the teams were just kicking the ball out of the end zone. And it wasn't punitive enough. The ball at the 30 wasn't punitive enough. So now they have changed it to the 35-yard line. So what they're hoping to do is incentivizing teams to kick in the required section and then have players return it. Well, this makes the Packers signing of Mecole Hardman even more appealing because now maybe you have Keyshawn Nixon and Mecole Hardman down there. And maybe you can get a little bit more creative. Not that Rich Bisaccia has shown the proclivity to do that at any point. But I think that is a useful change. We'll see if it's enough to get teams to say, we don't really want to kick it out of the back of the end zone because the 35-yard line, like that is a material difference. They want a return rate 70 to 75%. And in fact, Denver Broncos special teams coach Darren Rizzi, he thinks the return rate will more than double. It was about 33% last year. He thinks it will go to more like 70 to 75. Now, they want to bring the kickoff back, even though they changed it because of health and safety. And now they want more of this play that they thought was dangerous before. So I don't quite understand that part of it. But I do think it will create more opportunities for returns, which in the case of the Packers, you've got an all-pro returner, Keyshawn Nixon. You've got a very dangerous returner, Mecole Hardman. How many teams can say they have two of those guys? I think that's ultimately a net good for the Packers if more teams are returning it. So I like the rule changes for the moment. I hate that the nose wipe gesture is going to be, you guys know what I'm talking about, that thing. If you're not watching, you know what I'm talking about. That's going to be a flag for whatever reason. I guess they finally figured out. I don't know, we're not even going to get into it. But the last one is they're going to use Hawkeye technology to measure first downs in 2025. They've got a new technology. It's going to be basically like, not exactly like the tennis system because there's going to be bodies and stuff around, but they're going to be able to use modeling to try and make this all make a little bit more sense so you don't have to bring the chain gang out. Now, the chain gang are going to stay, I guess, for reasons, as a secondary check. But now this expedited replay stuff, I think, is going to make the game move faster. I think it's going to make the game better, but we'll see. More to come this week on Locked On Packers. Back tomorrow, much more as we get you set. The NFL draft, we're in April now. We're here. Hope you didn't fall for any April Fool's gags. So a lot more to come here on Locked On Packers. Follow me on all the social medias. Follow the podcast on all the social medias. Go subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. And over on YouTube, we're there too. So you can stay Locked On Packers.